Hello and welcome to the Week 5 edition of the Power Grid, the Footballguys DFS show. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined, as always, by Ryan Hester, Devin Knotts, John Lee, and Jeff Pasquino. We're going to talk about the Vegas lines here in a second, but it's a Week 5 has teams on the bye, so we're not going to be talking about those four teams, Atlanta, Denver, New Orleans, and Washington. And we're not going to talk about Thursday Night Football or Monday Night Football. We're going to focus just on the main slate, which leaves us 12 games on FanDuel. And then over at DraftKings, they did not include Sunday Night Football this week again, so the DraftKings main slate only has 11 games. So we're going to focus on those 11 to 12 games and give you guys some picks for your GPPs, your cash game lineups, etc. So let's move on to Vegas. John, I want to pitch it to you first because you do our Tuesday Vegas value chart article. Tell us what you're seeing from Vegas this week.
It's a really kind of a bland slate this week. Not a whole lot to love about anything. Last week we had all these big home favorites, lots of situations where you could love a running back. There is one running back this week that I think we'll all get behind, who's very expensive. But outside of that, one game, Green Bay, Dallas, looks like the game to be targeting, but it's going to be so extremely high owned. I think that you're going to have to use some game strategy when you start thinking about players to roster from that game. Outside of that, there's just a few, I think maybe 4 teams above 24 implied team total this week. So it's really kind of it's probably going to be a low scoring week. So, when you're setting your rosters, FanDuel, we're generally shooting for 120, 130, DraftKings 150. This might be a week where we see those scores come down a little bit after seeing them elevated last week.
Yeah, and that's why we don't really necessarily like having like a target score, because every week is a little bit different depending on which teams are on the bye, which teams are on the slate, and whether those sort of chalky players hit or not. You mentioned there's only 4 teams with a 24-point implied total. There's also only 2 teams that are favored by more than 3 points. That's Pittsburgh and Philly. So if you're in the state of Pennsylvania, I guess it's going to be a good weekend for you. Oh, John, you're in Pennsylvania. Holy cow, this is going to be a great weekend for you, except that you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. Jeff, what else is Vegas telling you?
Well, I think that John pretty much nailed it. It looks like a strange week, and it's also a unique week. There were a lot of road teams are favored, if they're even favored at all. But I think that what you need to do for this week, and I think cash games are going to be a little bit lower on the pricing point, but I think GPPs, you're going to have to look for those games you think you're going to shoot out, because there's going to be 1 or 2. You just have to pick them out from the crowd. And normally we look for games that have tight totals or tight spreads, and we have a lot of those this week. So it really comes down to a personal preference. Who do you think it's going to be? And I think we all have a few opinions this week.
Yeah, we should get into some of those as we name some of the players from those games, because some weeks I don't like digging too deep down the Vegas value chart, but this week you kind of have to. Ryan, is there another game you have your eye on, a game you think there's going to be a lot of DFS play from both sides, aside from that Green Bay-Dallas game that's so ripe for play?
Yeah, I like Seattle and LA at the Rams. Last year, these teams played a slugfest. It was a couple of field goals and 1 touchdown. It's going to be a lot different this year. And I think the thing with those 2 teams that's of note for us playing DFS is that the production is pretty narrow with those teams. We know Todd Gurley's going to get a lot of touches. We know Russell Wilson's going to have his hands on the ball every single play. We don't know what's going on with Seattle's running game, but maybe that just means more passing game. So I think that one has the potential to have 3-4 good DFS values in there that maybe you can even put in the same lineup.
Yep. I think we're going to find some plays from there. Devin, what's one other game you have your eye on?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are pretty interesting. So they're projected to score over 25 points, which they're facing the Arizona Cardinals defense, which so far this year has been terrific against the pass, and we'll get into running backs in a little bit. But how are they going to score those 25 points when you have that secondary of Tyvon Branch and Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu? That's the one that stood out to me as a little strange, but I think we'll get into some players that we like in that game.
Yep, good call. Let's get into some of those players and start off with quarterbacks. We've really got two key injuries here. Derek Carr is out with a back injury, so EJ Manuel is going to be starting for Oakland. And then Marcus Mariota has a hamstring injury. He had limited practice on Wednesday, but the Titans went out and signed Brandon Weeden. That is not a good sign for Mariota's chances of playing this week. So I doubt we see Mariota this week, although it's still possible. Ryan, let me come back to you and ask you about quarterbacks. Who is a quarterback that you like? Who do you think is a quarterback that's going to be pretty chalky this week?
I think people are going to want to try to get Aaron Rodgers in, but on sites like DraftKings and Fantasy Draft that are tighter in nature and pricing, it's going to be harder to do that. So people are going to look at that same game and step down to Dak Prescott. We know Green Bay allows a lot of production via the pass. We know Prescott's capable of it. So I think he's going to be a pretty highly owned guy. But, I like cheap quarterbacks this week. And there's one in particular that I have my eye on. I mean, there was one that our staff in our kind of behind the scenes chat mentioned, but I actually like, and I'll leave that, somebody else might mention him, but the one I like is Brian Hoyer. He gets Indy. He is very, very cheap, so he doesn't need to do a lot to get you there, but he affords you the luxury of being able to get a couple players, 6,500 or higher, talking about DraftKings type pricing. So I like Hoyer. He has a good matchup. He has faced very difficult defenses so far. So his bad games have been against very tough Ds. He had one good game against the Rams, who's maybe not the toughest defense in the world. So I think in a plus matchup, he's a guy that affords you the salary relief you need to go high elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think this is a week, not necessarily on FanDuel, but over on DraftKings, where you can make a call like that because you're going to have to sacrifice somewhere. Devin, who do you have your eye on at quarterback this week?
Yeah, there's a couple guys. I think the first guy that I'm looking at is actually Tyrod Taylor. So Drake Kirkpatrick and Adam Pac-Man Jones are both questionable for this game. If they're out, the Cincinnati defense becomes really weak really quickly. Tyrod isn't really a thrower, but I think that having the lack of secondary could be a good thing for both Jordan Matthews and Charles Clay this week. The other option I think is spend up at the top with Rodgers. It was mentioned that the Cowboys have really struggled out of the slot, defending the slot receivers this year, so which sets up well for Rodgers and Jordy and Randall Cobb. So I'm either spending all the way up or I'm going with one of the cheaper options down low.
Yeah, and I think with Tyrod Taylor, part of the concern there is that obviously Jordan Matthews is out with a thumb injury, so it's like Zay Jones and some of these other guys who are a little bit less experienced, but the matchup is primed for him to have a good game here. I feel like there's a lot of quarterbacks that are risky who have great matchups this week or like have not done much yet this year, but it's like, who are you going to take a chance on? I'm not going to take a chance on Jay Cutler, but like he's the kind of guy that's got a great matchup this week. It's like it kind of makes me quiver a little bit. John, who do you like at quarterback this week? Maybe one that's a safe play and one that's a little bit chancier.
Yeah, so I think the one guy I've got my eye on is Dak Prescott. He pulled through last week. This is a week where he goes up against the Green Bay secondary composed of Demarius Randall and rookie Kevin King. Not a whole lot there to love. His number one receiver all season, Des Bryant, has been locked up with some shutdown cornerbacks through the first 4 weeks. This is week number 5. It's the first time that Des has really had a plus matchup. And I think that Dak is going to make up for lost time, if you will. I suspect that this will be a game where we see Dak heavily used. The game pace here really favors the pass. I think the Cowboys will try to slow it down with Zeke Elliott, but they haven't been able to do that this year. If you look at their time of possession, they've been they have the ball less than their opponents this season, which is unlike the Cowboys we've seen in the past. So Dak Prescott definitely is a guy that I'm going to try to fit into my lineups on DraftKings at 6,800 because there he's kind of maybe a little bit at that middle ground, not going to the bottom of the barrel, but certainly not spending up at 8,100 on Rodgers. At the lower end, maybe a GPP model, a guy I might consider is Josh McCown this week going against Cleveland. Oh, I've got the red. I was looking at Devin for this. I was looking
Josh
at Devin.
McCown is terrible.
That was the other one I was referencing earlier, too.
Okay.
Such a homer pick, Devin. You and your Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
Boo.
To be honest, as soon as I hear Josh McCown, I don't even think about who he's playing because he's just he's not good. Like
he's looking at what he's done over the past. He's had 7 starts over the past 2 years. And he's got 2 300-yard performances, multiple 2-touchdown performances, and he's super cheap at 47 or 4,500 on DraftKings. I'm looking on the fly here, 4,500. I think that he's a guy you got to look at with Cleveland because Cleveland's really good up front this year. People have run the ball down their throats, and they're only allowing 3 yards per carry. You're not going to see Elijah McGuire run the ball down their throats. You're not going to see Bilal Powell do a whole lot outside of catching passes. So if the Jets do anything on offense, and that's the question here, but if they do anything on offense, it almost has to go through the air. And I think that I love the concept of pairing up Josh McCown with Robbie Anderson going up against Jamar Taylor, who's that awful cornerback there in Cleveland. They cost you almost nothing, and then you can max out on guys like Gurley, Bell, and really max out your roster. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for GPPs as of the night we're recording Thursday night.
the problem is, what is his upside? I mean, we talk about his upside, and yes, he had 300 yards, but I just don't see it.
If he has 300 yards, though, that's 3x value on its own. He gets a touchdown, it's 4x value.
If he has 202 touchdowns, you're there.
But okay.
I thought you meant 202 touchdowns.
No, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. That would be a record.
That would be fantastic.
There's no dispute that his upside is not in the arena of a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I'm not even suggesting that for a moment, but he's also half the price. So if he get me half the number of points of a ceiling of an Aaron Rodgers, I'm okay with that. And I think that he's definitely within that realm.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is the week for risky picks. You know, I mean, there's a lot of cheap options that aren't quite safe. Jeff, who do you like at quarterback?
Well, a lot of good conversation out there, and there's still even more names to talk about. I think you have to look at guys in the middle of the road of price and risk and value. I like both Eli Manning and Carson Palmer. I think both those guys are going to be throwing the ball a lot. They're in good matchups. Carson Palmer against the Eagles secondary is really their weakness. Eli Manning has no ground game to speak of, and I think both these guys are pretty good, safe options. GPP plays, I'm still looking at Cam. I still think Cam, Ryan and I were talking behind the scenes this week about some of the numbers there. He's better on turf. He's about 20% better fantasy point-wise for rushing and about 50% or 40 to 50% passing for some reason on turf. And he just plants better, cuts better. His touchdown interception ratio is much better. So I think – and he also mentioned this week narrative streak coming from the quarterback means more. He mentioned that Devin Funchess is from Detroit. So he went out of way to say that. So I think that he's going to be targeting him, and that's who I'd look to pair Cam with this week.
Yeah, it also helps that Kelvin Benjamin will probably be shadowed by Darius Slay in this game. So I think Funchess is the easier matchup for sure. Let's move on to running backs, guys. There are several injuries here. We've got Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks on injured reserve with an ankle injury. And CJ Prosise, also of the Seahawks, has an ankle injury, did not practice on Wednesday. I don't know if that opens any sort of interesting DFS options between Rawls, Lacey, and J.D. McKissick, but it's worth mentioning. Wendell Smallwood did not practice on Thursday. Maybe that opens the door for Blount or Corey Clement. We're also watching the Packers running backs a little bit here. Ty Montgomery had limited practice Thursday, and Jamal Williams looks like he's going to go. If I had to guess, I'd say Williams plays, Montgomery doesn't, but it's still up in the air. And then Matt Forte didn't practice on Thursday. I really doubt he plays with the turf toe this week. John, let's kick it to you first on running backs. Tell me, who's the chalk and who do you like?
I love, and I think we all do, Le'Veon Bell this week.
Sure.
The biggest thing with Le'Veon Bell this week is just the opportunity cost. What does rostering him in your lineups, especially on DraftKings, what does that do to the remainder of your roster? And I know that there are people out there who may not be familiar with the term opportunity cost. So I think it's important for us to discuss what it means. And what it means is you get a guy that's really expensive into your lineup, and it forces you to go 4,000 everywhere else or 5,000 and take too many chances everywhere else. The opportunity cost then becomes too high to put him into your lineup, especially in a cash game situation where you're seeking a floor at every position. And that's what I've been struggling with. I've been making a few lineups this evening on DraftKings, and I'm taking some chances, and I'm not going to lie about that. I'm taking some chances, and I'm not sure where I'm going to end up, but I want to get Le'Veon Bell because this Jacksonville defense is just the epitome of what we refer to as a funnel defense. They're funneling all the action to the run, allowing a monstrosity on the ground, pulling it up here, 5.7 yards per carry, almost 170 rushing yards per game. And we got a guy who finally found his groove last week. And that secondary is phenomenal with Ajayi and Jalen Ramsey. I think this is a game where Bell touches the ball 30 times. And if I can find any way to get him into my lineups, I'm doing so this weekend.
7.96 yards per rush over the last 3 weeks.
Wow. That's incredible. And now you got arguably the best running back in the league going up against them.
Yeah.
I'll go a little bit further than you. I'll say you have to have Le'Veon Bell in your cash games.
Yeah. At FanDuel, it's a no-brainer. It's easy to get him in at FanDuel. At DraftKings, you're looking at things like, am I going to play a tight end in the flex to create space? Like, 2 really cheap receivers, maybe 3 cheap receivers.
I mean, if you're John, just go Josh McCown and you're good.
I was going to ask who your quarterback is with Le'Veon Bell, but
I've got Dak Prescott right now.
As of right now, I have Carson Palmer.
Okay.
Yeah, just to save a little money there. Devin, since you added on to this conversation, tell me more about your running back guys beyond Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I think Todd Gurley is the other guy that's going to be extremely popular. No surprise here. He's been – his utilization out of the passing game has just been unbelievable. He had 96 yards receiving last week. He had over 100 yards for last week as well, and he's getting a significant number of touches. So – He's probably the guy that I'm looking at, but at the same time, fitting both him and Bell is on FanDuel. It's easy, but on DraftKings, it's almost impossible. So, but the Seahawks have been terrible against the run. They really haven't been good, and Cliff Averill is going to be out. So. This is a lineup. This is a prime opportunity for Todd Gurley to get some passes to get a significant volume in the rushing game.
Yep, and I think those are going to be 2 very highly owned guys. I think we're going to see that pair in a lot of cash game lineups at FanDuel. Jeff, tell me about your running backs. Give me a few guys you like.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 guys you got to hit on. We've already touched on the top 2, but I think that on a site with like full PPR, I think Carlos Hyde has to bubble towards the top. I think that he's going to see a lot of targets against the Colts this week, and he's going to be the guy that moves the sticks for that team. So he's very inexpensive. Well, he's relatively inexpensive, coming down to about like $6,900 on DraftKings. So certainly like nearly 50% off of Le'Veon Bell. So. That's a guy I like. I also like Christian McCaffrey. Going back to that Carolina game, I think that I'm liking that Carolina-Detroit game. He had a lot of points in there. And one more, I think Melvin Gordon is going to see a lot of touches this week, and I think he's going to be off the radar for a GPP pick. I think San Diego, the Chargers.
Right. I've seen professional announcers do the same thing like every week.
It's so hard. They didn't change their logo. It's still the Chargers.
I know.
The Chargers are not going to be able to throw very well on the Giants, so they're going to have to run the ball, and they'll resort to short passes, and Gordon wants the ball. He wasn't fed much last week. They lost the game again to the Eagles, so I think he's going to see a lot of touches.
Yeah, I have a little bit of nervousness. Maybe I have a bias against Gordon because he burned me so bad last week. But I have this bias against these West Coast teams playing East Coast games at 1 o'clock. But the matchup feels so right. Let's see, Ryan, who else do you like at running back?
Well, you may have noticed from the couple of green black-eyed Joes I gave, it seemed like Jeff read my list, so we're in lockstep.
Nice.
So I'll just go a little cheaper since we're talking about, maybe jamming in Le'Veon Bell or Todd Gurley. If you need a flex on DraftKings or you want to go cheap RB2 on FanDuel, just cheap touches. Lamar Miller, Amir Abdullah. So on the other side of the game Jeff likes in Detroit is Amir Abdullah. Lamar Miller's going to get cheap touches. He's at home. Scored 2 touchdowns last week. That offense seems to be finding its rhythm. And then Andre Ellington in a game that Arizona is likely to be trailing, at least if you believe Vegas. He made a couple of nice plays last week where he looked like a wide receiver, so he's going to catch some balls. He had a number of targets, so he'll get some volume in the passing game, which, as we know, is pretty valuable on DraftKings. So that's just a couple cheap guys to help people maybe in that last spot where they can't figure out what to do. So.
Yeah, and Ellington's price is still pretty cheap on DK at 4,600.
I got 2 more.
Yeah, hit me with 2 more.
So I mentioned in the beginning that the Eagles are facing a tough Arizona team. LeGarrette Blount's a guy I'm looking at. So Wendell Smallwood is, I believe, questionable for this game. So Blount actually looked really strong last week. He had over 100 yards, scored a touchdown. So he's a guy that I'm looking at. How else if you believe Vegas and they're projected to score over 25 points, where are those touchdowns going to come from? So at 4,200 on DraftKings, I think we don't typically like to play LeGarrette Blount on DraftKings just because he doesn't catch passes in a full PPR. But I think that they're going to move the ball pretty well in that game. The other guy and you get your black-eyed Joes out, Wayne Gallman of the New York Giants. So the Los Angeles Chargers have allowed 4.8 yards per carry. Paul Perkins is likely out for this game. Orleans Darkwa looks like he might play. So if he starts, just substitute what I'm saying for Gallman into Orleans Darkwa. 163.5 yards per game for the Chargers. This is not a good run defense. They're both incredibly cheap. As GPP plays, we're trying to save money. You could do worse than those 2.
I'll give you the situation. I won't give you the talent when you say Gallman and Darkwa.
Gallman catches passes.
He's way
catches
better.
passes.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying Gallman, you can't just plug in Darkwa. I would change my lineup.
All right. So we'll stick with the Gallman pick.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll go with Gallman, but not Darkwa. I'm with you.
Yes. All right. Let's see. Here's a few other names I had on my list that I'm considering that you guys haven't mentioned yet. I think that if you're playing on FanDuel, you've got that Sunday Night Football contest. You might consider pivoting to Kareem Hunt. He's probably going to have decently high ownership, but I think you're going to see a lot more people on Bell and Gurley. So if you want another high-priced back, he should be considered. And then Ezekiel Elliott, I think, is going to have lower than usual ownership here. I think people are going to be all over the passing games for these 2 teams. And then, the other sort of chalky running backs. Elliott still has a ton of upside for your GPP plays. I like Jay Ajayi to have a bounce back week this week. That Tennessee defense looks terrible. I know it's risky going with the Dolphins offense because they have looked maybe even more terrible. But I think that Ajayi is in play for GPPs this week at a really cheap price. Ryan, you hate that pick.
I don't hate the go against Tennessee, Miami bounce back pick. I'm just more into the passing game, especially when it comes to kind of a cash game style of lineup.
Yeah, and I have some of those guys on my list as well. And then DeMarco Murray, I think, is worth considering at how cheap he is. That's another guy that I'll have some GPP exposure to.
So one quick note about Ezekiel Elliott. So if Mike Daniels is out, he's a prolific nose tackle, run stopper. That severely diminishes the Packers rush defense. So keep an eye on that one. Elliott's status would be great if Daniels is out.
Good call. I like that. Devin and Justin and Keith all do these amazing matchup articles over at Footballguys that you can check out, breaking down every game. And that's where Devin's pulling a lot of this great information about injuries that, are on the lines and in the linebacking cores and things like that can really plus up the value of some of these offensive players. Let's talk about wide receivers. We've got a handful of injuries here. Michael Crabtree is questionable with a lung injury. Devontae Adams has a concussion. He had limited practice Thursday. Marquise Goodwin has a concussion, limited practice Thursday. It's a bad week for Marquise. Marquise Lee didn't practice on Thursday. He doesn't look like he's going to go with a rib injury. It also does not look like Kenny Golladay is going to go for Detroit. Didn't practice on Thursday. Jeff, tell me about receivers that you like this week.
It's a kind of a leaner week at wide receiver. I think that I'm hoping for some quarterback situations to give me some value, but I like Larry Fitzgerald's matchup. I think that at the top end, Jordy Nelson and Dez Bryant are going to be your two chalk plays. Those are going to be the two guys everybody's going to try and squeeze in.
Yep.
But you're really looking for value after that. And I think I would like to play Rashard Matthews, but that's only if Mariota's playing and if the weather is cooperative. After that, it gets a little sketchy for GPPs. I may pivot to Cobb instead of Jordy Nelson for Green Bay, just for a lower ownership. But after that, for GPP plays, I'm kind of looking at I mentioned Funchess earlier, but I'm also looking at Jerron Brown, who can get deep against that Philadelphia secondary.
Yeah, he gives you some great salary relief. That's one of my key salary relief guys. Ryan, you mentioned maybe the Miami pass catchers here. Tell me a little bit more about them and any other receivers you might like.
Yeah, it seems like Devontae Parker is the guy that everybody's on this week. He has the touchdown upside more so than Jarvis Landry. He's been getting pretty steady volume. I kind of like Landry, though. He's cheaper, especially on full PPR sites. I guess that's where he's a lot better, of course. But he's cheaper than Parker. He's seeing volume as well. Jay Cutler seems to be allergic to throwing it downfield, even against New Orleans. He may not score a touchdown, but I'll take 8 catches and 80 yards at his price. And as a filler in a lineup where I want to go heavy elsewhere, expensive elsewhere, I like both of those receivers. But don't forget about Landry. It seems like everybody's on Parker,
especially over at DraftKings. You would expect Landry to be higher priced over at DK relatively, but he's actually pretty cheap over at DraftKings this week. Devin, tell me about receivers you got your eye on.
My favorite guy this week's T.Y. Hilton. So Kwan Williams is likely going to match up quite a bit against Hilton. Kwan Williams has been horrible this year, so this is a prime matchup for Hilton. He had a little bit of a rough week last week, only three catches for 30 yards, but he exploded last week, or 2 weeks ago, against Cleveland. So 7 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown. So it appears that him and Brissett are trying to get on the same page. He was just in a tough matchup last week against the Seahawks. So he's a guy that I'm really looking at this week, especially because he has the upside of one of those elite receivers, but his price is severely you save quite a bit to get to that upside, basically.
Especially on DraftKings, only 6K on DraftKings.
Yep.
Let's see. Who have we not heard from on receivers yet? Anyone have anything else on receivers? John, you got receivers?
I think you guys have hit the high points. If I'm looking at a guy for GPPs that hasn't been mentioned, don't be afraid to come off of Jordy Nelson this week in that big game and maybe look at a guy like Randall Cobb, particularly if Devontae Adams is out. Cobb looked incredible last Thursday night while we were recording this show. Watch that game back. He looks like his old self, and the Cowboys have bled yardage to that slot receiver position over the past few weeks. Last week they gave up 5 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown to Cooper Kupp. And then the week prior, we all remember they basically made Larry Fitzgerald look 20 years younger, giving up 13 catches, 150 yards, and a score. And then Manny Sanders, the week prior, even scored out of the slot. So this is a really ideal situation for Randall Cobb, and he's relatively affordable. I think he'll be lesser owned than Jordy Nelson will be. So don't sleep on him in your GPPs this weekend.
And if it seems like Devontae Adams is going to go in this game, he's only 5,800 over at DraftKings and has some touchdown upside there. That seems like a guy that you'd want to keep an eye on if it feels like he's going to actually play a full, accompaniment of snaps. 3 big receivers that didn't get mentioned here, Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, and A.J. Green. Would anyone like to talk about one of those 3 guys? Because a couple of these guys have tough matchups. Let's go to you, Ryan. What do you think about? Is there one of those guys you like?
Yeah, even though you already came to me, I was going to attempt to cut you off there and say, just in general, it seems, the contrarian move this week is to buy up at wide receiver. I mean, we're talking about Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell at running back. But when are you going to get Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham at less ownership than they'll be at this week due to lineup construction? Jacksonville has a great pass defense on paper, but the quarterbacks they have faced have been brutal. I mean, it was Tom Savage and Deshaun Watson in week 1, Joe Flacco in London. I can't place the other two. Mariota 1 week, and Tennessee actually did score some points against them. And then McCown last week. That's who they were. So not exactly a murderer's row, and they're not exactly Roethlisberger and company at home. So I like Brown the best out of the high-priced guys. But if you can squeeze any of them or both of them in there, that would be a good contrarian way to move up in GPPs. And you don't have to buy Julio Jones and worry about him getting hurt midweek because he's on a bye.
Exactly. You can't be fooled by him. I
not
agree.
That I'm sour about that or anything.
No, not at all. Brown, of those guys, Brown is the guy who I think could beat tough coverage here. I'm not real keen on Odell Beckham going up against Casey Hayward. AJ Green also is a pretty tough matchup. But let me see the Black Eyed Joes. Anybody considering AJ Green for GPPs here? I see red from Devin. I'm going red on this one. Ryan's going red. Yeah, Jeff's kind of back and forth. John says Green. Tell me, John, why AJ Green?
The Buffalo defense has looked really good, but last week was their first true test against a big-name receiver, and we saw Julio Jones go out early. I think they're still untested. Tre'Davious White looks like the real deal, first-round draft pick, extremely talented. I just wonder whether or not he matches up well against an NFL veteran of AJ Green's caliber. He's going to be under-owned, and that's why I think he's still in play in GPPs. So I'm not getting away from him just yet because of what we've seen out of Buffalo in through a month at this point.
Yeah. The problem is you're betting against Bell and Gurley if you go up to that top receivers, and
that's the point. I mean,
I know it's the point, but this is not a week that I want to bet against those running backs.
Even in GPPs.
There are some weeks where the matchups are just too good that I will eat the high owned player and basically differentiate elsewhere. So that's my strategy this week. I just don't want to be on the wrong side of it when Bell has 150 yards or Gurley has 150 yards and I'm out of it by just because of not having one player.
So let's have that conversation. At what point does ownership get too high on those two guys? At what point do you say I can no longer stay with the crowd? I've got to be under-owned on them.
That's a good question. I'm not the biggest ownership guy. I look at if I'm going to take two spots in my roster and they're high owned, they could be 50%, and I would still take them this week. I will differentiate elsewhere because I am believing that they are going to be in the winning rosters.
All right, so I'm going to take the opposite stance if it's 50%. We talked about this before. It is a great conversation to be having. Nobody's right here. It's a game strategy discussion. And if you're thinking a guy is 50% owned, and do I go with him? Do I not go with him? Basically, what you're asking yourself is, 50% of the time, is he going to reach the value that I expect of him to win me a GPP? Now, for a lot of guys, that's a 4X value. I think with where the guys we're talking about this week on a low-scoring week, I don't think they have to get 4X, but they certainly have to get 3 to 3.5X to validate their positions in your roster. For me, 50% on almost across the board, unless it's like a 3K crapper, I'm fading that because
we both know they're not going to be 50%, right? So Steve
What
Buzzard
about 30%? Are they going to be like – is that still high?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think 30% is probably right for Bell or Gurley. Steve Buzzard has it at 29 for Elliott, 26 for Bell, and 19 for Gurley. He has Antonio Brown at 14 and AJ Green at 14. So there really isn't that big of a difference according to his projections, and they'll be updated on Saturday based on the trends.
Yep.
So I would keep an eye on those. But if they're only going to be 5 or 10% difference, what's the point?
It's the conversation that we're having.
It's fair.
The 50% thing, I wanted to speak to that because it's an important thing to talk about. And our listeners, subscribers, we want to break these things down from a game strategy perspective. I think 30% is reasonable for those guys this week. For the record, as I'm thinking about it out, I haven't gotten this far in my process. I generally make those decisions on Saturday, but I think that's about where I'll be. I won't be overweight or necessarily underweight. But those are pretty high salaries, and I think you really do yourself a potential disservice by getting both of them in your roster, because your roster uniqueness then suffers from a tournament standpoint.
And keep in mind, just so that we clarify, you and I are very different players. So I'm primarily a crash game player. I'll only do 10 GPP lineups. So in those 10, I will have at least Gurley or Bell in all 10. If you're building 50 or 100 like you build, I'm fine with differentiating yourself a little bit.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you raised another point, Devin, which is to kind of get off of that ownership, you can put one in but not the other. And that'll differentiate you from the guys that are using both in, those lineups. I think a good amount of that percentage of ownership is going to come from people using both of those guys. So that's one way that I'll mix it up a bit. One last guy before we move on to tight ends is I noticed that Alshon Jeffrey has a tough matchup against Patrick Peterson this week. So maybe I sneak Nelson Aguilar into some GPP lineups. He's also a little bit lesser priced, and I think that's where the Eagles could go in their passing game this week. Let's move on to tight ends. Ryan, I'm going to pitch it to you. We've got one injury, Tyler Eifert. We might as well just stop mentioning him until he actually starts practicing, because who knows how long he's going to be out. There's really no significant tight end injuries on the main slate this week. Ryan, who do you like at tight end?
Yeah, a guy that I haven't been hearing from. I don't hear from any of these players. Hearing about this week.
You're not pen pals with any of these guys? I get letters from all kinds of people. Tom Brady's writing me letters.
Nor do I mention them on Twitter when they don't do well in my lineups. I don't do that.
Never do that.
No, don't ever do that, people, please. Gosh, anybody watching this show is too smart to do that. Anyways, I haven't heard a lot about him, but Delaney Walker, we know he's going to get volume. We know that target distribution there is a little thin. Miami hasn't done great against tight ends. They have a smaller sample size than the rest of the league, but Delaney Walker's a guy that I might plug in. If he's hard to get to and you just need an absolute stone bottom of the barrel punt, George Kittle is the minimum on both sites, and he played almost all the snaps last week. He didn't get a ton of targets, but he's on the field, which is more than you can say for a lot of other 2,500 or 4,500 guys.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a chance.
That's it.
Jeff, talk to me about tight ends. Who's the chalk this week?
The chalk. I think if you can afford him, it's Zach Ertz, because I think that's where the touchdown comes from for Philadelphia this week. But I don't think many people are going to be able to afford him. So, especially when they're trying to jam in those two running backs we talked about. So I think you're going to be looking to cheaper plays like Evan Ingram for the Giants and also Charles Clay. Those are probably two. And there's one more, which I think goes back to John's point about the Jets, and this is where I would consider stacking, which is Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I think that is the Jets quarterback loves to dump the ball off the tight end. He had a big year with the Cleveland tight end, which
Gary
Barnidge.
Thank you.
Barnkowski
had a huge year with him. And ASJ is primed to have a great week this week. You can really load up on the Jets. Take the one gamble of the game script. Triple stack the Jets. John, I think you're with me on this one.
I'm loving it.
And we just ride the Jets to victory.
The Jets can get us out of the hole.
There we go.
That's a scary
3-2 Jets.
That's a scary thought.
Good luck, boys. I'm out.
Devin, is there a tight end that you like this week that hasn't been mentioned? I agree that Clay, Ertz, and Ingram are probably going to see the highest ownership.
Not really. I think if you want to look at a cheap touchdown, maybe Tyler Kroft. But he had 6 for 68 and 2 touchdowns last week against the Browns. But I don't know, with Tyler Eifert being out, there really aren't a lot of good options. I'm all in on Evan Ingram. He's the guy I'm looking at, but there really aren't a lot of good options this week.
John, you don't like the Croft pick. I also need your help here. It feels like the Chargers have a great matchup for the tight end this week against the Giants. But who do you pick, Hunter Henry or Antonio Gates? So tell me about Croft, and then help me pick a Chargers tight end.
Well, I mean, where Croft is concerned, I talked about him on the Roto Grinders Football Guys show with you last night. I pointed out that he has 800 career snaps and over that period of time, 1 touchdown. Last week in one game, he got 2 touchdowns. I'm going towards history and not last week, even though last week is history, maybe some distant history. I don't believe it. I think it was more of a byproduct of Devin's esteemed Cleveland Browns, who also gave up 2 touchdowns to a guy who I don't think has got a touchdown since then, that guy being Jesse James. With regards to the situation there in
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
It's because it's California, right? That's
Yes.
the issue. If it weren't California, I could do it, but it's like, it's at that state. It's on the other side of the country.
They're different cities.
East Coast
Short
bias, huh?
drive, just 3 hours.
You and your East Coast bias.
it's pretty close. I mean,
Isn't San Diego a suburb?
No, it's not a oh my gosh. All of our San Diego listeners have just turned us off. They're gonna send hate mail. Oh my gosh. It's like a 3-hour drive from LA to San Diego with
Close
traffic.
North
All right.
side of Chicago to south side of Chicago is about 3 hours during rush hour, so it's a suburb.
During rush hour.
Oh my gosh.
all right, so we've gotten derailed here. My personal preference is still Antonio Gates. I know Henry. I think Henry got into the end zone last week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he had 2 catches, one of them in the end zone. But he's been held scoreless 2 weeks out of 4. So 50% of the time, this guy has not even scored a point, despite playing on those 2 weeks, 64 snaps. The guy is still Gates there, but I'm probably avoiding this situation because there is some uncertainty with regards to what you're looking at. For me, I think you got to try to get a guy like Charles Clay into your lineups this week. If you can afford him, he's the number 1 receiver on that offense this week, and he's going to avoid those perimeter matchups that are the bad matchups against that Cincinnati defense, assuming, to Devin's point earlier, that Pac-Man Jones and Drake Kirkpatrick are not active.
Yeah, Jeff, you look like you had one quick point, and then we got to move to defenses and kickers.
Absolutely, but there is one more California tight end I think was worth mentioning. That's Jared Cook against the Ravens. I think that's a great matchup. EJ Manuel, again, quarterback, is going to just drop the ball off. And the Ravens are terrible. Look what they did for Mercedes Lewis in his career that we didn't even know he was still in the league until that game. So,
yep. He was the last guy I had on my list, too. Yep. Let's talk defenses and kickers. Hold up those black-eyed Joes. Who wants to talk about a defense or a kicker? John says no. I'm shocked. We'll let Devin fill in the gaps. Nope. He's going to say no. He's going to watch the Indians game. And let's go to Ryan first for a pick. What do you got?
Well, I'll let Jeff cover the chalk. I just wanted to make quick mention that there's a couple of potential backup quarterback situations this week. So Baltimore's facing EJ Manuel. Granted, they're on the road in Oakland, but it's still a backup quarterback. And then Miami is hosting Tennessee, who signed Brandon Weeden this week, which may not be a good indication that Marcus Mariota can play. If he cannot, they will see Matt Castle, and I would like a piece of that. So just good to keep in mind. They're not very expensive from what I recall as well. So just ideas if you're looking to save money and go cheap on defense.
Yeah, Matt Pick 6 Castle. He reminded us of that in a half game last week. Jeff, guide us down defense kicker lane here.
I think the chalk defense is going to be the Eagles if you can squeeze them in, although I'm not really high on them because I think that Carson Palmer is going to have a decent week. I'm more looking at Pittsburgh and Oakland. I think that both those teams are going to be all over the team. Baltimore looks terrible. If they can shut down the scant run game that they have, they're not going to be able to score except for their kicker, which I'm not even favoring him this week. So the kicker I am favoring this week is Jake Elliott. I think he's probably going to be the highest owned, but he's a home favorite, $4,700, right in the middle towards the lower end. if you want to go and get a piece of the Green Bay Dallas game, I don't begrudge you on either kicker for Dan Bailey or Mason Crosby, but that I'm probably sticking to Jake Elliott. It worked out for me with Dawson last week, and I'll stick with Elliott this week.
Yep, I think those are all great picks. Let's talk stacks, fellas. We'll go around the horn here. I think that a lot of people are going to be stacking that high-scoring game, the Dallas-Green Bay game, maybe even in cash games. So I don't know that you're going to get a lot of ownership differentiation by trying to stack in that game. But the rest of the slate feels pretty wide open in terms of finding decent ownership in your stacks. Devin, hit me with a stack that you like.
Another stack that we haven't mentioned. Let's go with – it's going to be off the rails a little bit. I mentioned how much I like T.Y. Hilton. I'm going Jacoby Brissett and T.Y. Hilton against the 49ers. Brissett has the rushing upside, so we've seen him rush for 2 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton, I already talked about him and how great his matchup is against K'Wan Williams. It's a cheap enough stack that allows you to get value elsewhere. So we've talked about saving money this entire show. It's a stack where you can really pay off by going cheap at your quarterback position.
Yep, that was my favorite. I was going to mention that one. Ryan, I think you've got my second favorite one, so I'm going to go to you next. Who's your stack this week?
Well, I won't be a homer because I talk about the Steelers every show, whether prompted or not. So I'll go elsewhere. I like. I guess we'll call this the Devin Knotts Memorial stack here, and say Russ Wilson and Doug Baldwin
every week,
until it works, and even after it did the one time. Baldwin was a little gimpy last week coming off the pulled groin, so keep an eye on the practice reports, even if he may be limited regardless whether he's fine or not, but just something to keep an eye on. We do record Thursdays, but I don't know how Seattle's going to get production if it's not in the passing game, and Baldwin's Wilson's favorite target, and Wilson also has rushing upside, as we know. So that's my stack for the week.
Nice. I like it. John, hit me with maybe a couple of stacks. What do you got?
If you're going that Green Bay game, the obvious one to me is Dak and Dez. That's a shout out to Devin too. He does this every week, I think. Yeah, there we go. See, you're making a mark, Devin. I think that's an excellent stack this week. It's really not that expensive on DraftKings either. It's 13-3. So I think I can definitely get behind that. I've already mentioned the McCown, Robbie Anderson stack. Robbie Anderson has an excellent matchup this week. So don't forget that. You can actually, I think, the way I would do that is if you're in a big tournament, by big tournament, I mean, let's say over 1,000 people, you could actually do the double stack with ASJ for 12,000.
Wait. Hold on. You're saying triple stack Jets, like roster 3 Jets on the same team.
This is a family show, or I would say something that I would regret.
Wow.
What you need from those guys, if you get those 3 guys in your lineup, and by the way, this is not a high percentage play here. I'm talking 5% of your GPP investment. But I could see a scenario in like by all means, the Millionaire Maker, you're going to get those guys at super low ownership. They're going to be $12,000 for 3 players. If he throws a touchdown to each of them, I'm pretty close to where I need to be.
So you can see a scenario where that happens. I can also see a scenario where Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny are all real. Neither are going to happen.
I seem to remember a Cam Newton discussion about a week ago that sounded very similar to this.
Yeah, but Cam Newton at least has something in his
I think you
bag.
said Cam Newton was pretty close to being bad at football last week. So I think we're going to stick with – I think the odds are there that I'm with John. I'm with John on this. I'll play the odds, and I'll take the cheapness of the Jets. The math works.
Last year, week 8 against the Jets, no less. He threw for 341 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's pretty darn good. And if he can do that again, he did it last year against a bad team. He could do it this year against a team. I'm not all over this play. We're blowing it out of proportion, but it's certainly viable.
You've only mentioned it 7 times this show.
Well, because you keep making me bring it up and defend it. All right, so my favorite play that's kind of off the board, I'm going to Phillip Rivers to Travis Benjamin against Eli Apple. It's really cheap at 9,800, and I'm waiting on Phillip Rivers to blow up, and I think that this game is coming. I don't know if it's this week, but it's certainly coming.
Just for the record, I'm with Devin. I'm going to take Devin's side on this whole Jets shenanigans thing. Jeff, tell me about some stacks you like.
Well, we've hit a lot of them. We know where I come down on several of them. I think that I like the Eli Manning, but not Odell Beckham. I think Sterling Shepard has a better receiver matchup this week, so that's where I'm looking. And throw Ingram in there too. I don't mind throwing that all together. I also like Cam once again with Funchess, and I'll throw McCaffrey in there, who hasn't found the end zone yet, but he's on the field an awful lot. And I think that he finds the end zone finally this week. Those are my two favorite stacks that haven't been mentioned too much yet.
Yeah, and I think this is the week where you it isn't too cute to choose the second receiver for a team, because some of these top receivers have really tough matchups. I think, though, if one of these guys is going to break that mold, it's going to be Antonio Brown. You might get Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown stacked up for lower ownership than ordinary. They're not going to be a off-the-radar stack per se, but some people will be scared away from Antonio Brown's matchup. The guy that I thought that Ryan was going to mention is Brian Hoyer and Pierre Garçon. Vontae Davis generally plays the other side of the field from where Pierre Garçon lines up, so Davis is going to be more on the Goodwin, Aldrick Robinson side of the field, so I could see Hoyer Garçon being that wacky cheap stack kind of in the Josh McCown sort of mold of low ownership. So I'd rather go with that pairing than the McCown pairing this week. Guys, any other stacks you feel like we have neglected to mention that we would be a disservice without mentioning them? Everybody's good?
I think you could throw Carlos Hyde in the one that you just mentioned. I think that'd be a reasonable contrarian play to work on the leverage the San Francisco play, especially with Hyde catching the ball in the backfield.
Yeah, because especially on DK where he's maybe getting enough catches for that. It's tricky to pair a running back with their pass catcher quarterback situation, but if they really blow out the other team, it can totally work. And in Indy, that could happen. All right, let's move on to parting thoughts, fellas. Your well-asked words of wisdom. Tell us about some sort of project you're working on, whatnot. Devin, tell us, what are your parting thoughts for this evening?
I'll make it quick because John and I have fought enough on this show.
It's great.
It's what the people come for.
That's what the people want.
Yeah. The one thing I'll mention is that I do a blog on Footballguys, which basically is a cash game. We talked about different strategies a lot in this show, and I'm primarily a cash game player. So we're talking a lot of cash game strategies. I give my cash game lineup, bankroll management strategies, all that type of good stuff to see how I'm exactly playing each given week. So I would encourage everyone to go over there and check it out. Just if you don't play cash games and you want to start playing cash games, or you're saying, hey, I'm losing in cash games and want to see some different strategies, head on over there and check it out.
That's great advice. Yeah, you've been getting a lot of traction over there with your tips. John, what do you have for our listeners and viewers as we depart?
In line with talking about some of our features, I think this week I'll talk a little bit about our roundtables. It's something that's been a tried and true football guys feature for some time, and we've implemented it as part of the DFS scene last year and then going into this year. The thing about this is we do an early week and a late week component here, and the early week stuff is really nice because it kind of gets you primed for what's happening. And this week, just looking at the site, BJ Vanderwood, is that how we say his last name? I can never get it right.
Yes.
BJ put together a couple questions, and our internal DFS experts talked about the wide receiver points per battle. What is wrong with me? It's getting late. That's my issue.
It's the tongue twister, and you're turning into a pumpkin.
My tongue is turning into a pumpkin.
Too much Josh McCown.
The wide receiver points per dollar battle. So we're talking about how to save money this week, and he kind of asked some of our experts what they think. And you go back through finding middle tier quarterback value, low projected games with shootout potential, something we kind of talked about tonight. These are all topics that are really interesting for building rosters later in the week, and we get them out there fairly early. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're generally on the site by Wednesday. Is that
Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, somewhere in there?
There we go. So, as you're kind of pining for a little bit of DFS content early in the week, that's where you can go while the rest of us are working out some of these injury situations for our articles later in the week.
Yep, great recommendation. Jeff, parting thoughts.
Yeah, I think that we did a good job of bringing some of the thoughts in here about cash versus GPP, game theory, and I write the FanDuel GPP, and I try to article, and I try to bring some game theory in, and to bring that full circle. Like when we talked about the two running backs this week, I personally would not. I would be more in favor of fading Bell because he's at 9,500. I think he's much higher bar to hit the 4X level that we're talking about for GPPs. But the real GPP play, I think, for in the game theory is when the guy's going to be extremely high owned, and if you fade him, like for if you had James Conner instead of Le'Veon Bell, and you knew he's going to be 60% owned, and if he falls in his face, 60% of the teams are going to go down, and then you'll be above them. So that's more the game theory kind of play. But we talk about that in the GPPs, and that's an important aspect if you're playing tournaments. How do you get above 60, 75, 80% of the rest of the field? And that's
you rooting for injuries over here?
No.
You mentioned James Conner and started.
Don't talk about Le'Veon Bell getting hurt, Jeff.
The Steelers fan just quit the show.
I'm just giving an example. Let's say Dalvin Cook's backup. Let's say Latavius Murray. Let's say we loved him. I know he's on Monday night. Let's say he was going to be 75% on the slate. Then you'd fade him. I think that would be a reasonable play. And I'll just mention one name that we didn't mention earlier because of games that are off the beaten path because of what DraftKings and FanDuel are doing. Ty Hill, this is another game theory play. Tyreek Hill, I think he's a great receiver this week. If you're fading Kareem Hunt, a lot of people are going to be playing that extended slate or on FanDuel or playing specific slates that include that game on DraftKings. They're probably going to want to try and get Kareem Hunt. The GPP play there would be to fade him and get Tyreek Hill in the play. I think he's a much better play this week than even Kelsey.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah, and on FanDuel, it's part of the main slate, so people may overlook that if they're playing on both sites. Ryan, wrap up our parting thoughts.
Yeah, this week to me shapes up like an interesting GPP week. So building off what Jeff said, there's kind of multiple ways to get differentiation in GPP. Lineup construction, leveraging against the chalk plays, and salary pivots, right? So an example of each this week would be rostering Antonio Brown instead of Le'Veon Bell. So that's a leverage against the chalk play in the same game. A salary pivot might be something like on FanDuel where Pierre Garçon is the same salary as Larry Fitzgerald. So Fitzgerald is the chalk. You go right over to Garçon, plug him into the exact same or similar lineup that everybody else is doing. You get your differentiation, and you still have some upside. And then, just lineup construction, just going against the high-end running backs and paying up at receivers that we kind of mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of good examples of all those strategies this week. And if you can kind of find the skeleton key to do all three of them effectively, might be a very good week for you.
Yeah, those kind of choices get me really jazzed about making lineups. So I'm excited about this week, even though it doesn't look like a lot of high scoring. Those are the kind of weeks I actually look forward to. So that's going to do it for us tonight. For all of our latest DFS content, be sure to head over to footballguys.com/DFS. You can get all of our website content for the entire season for $45 by subscribing to the Insider Pro Plus subscription. That gives you season-long DFS, Dynasty, IDP, you name it, the whole site for just $45. Just check us out, footballguys.com/DFS. So I am Austin Lee on behalf of Devin Knotts, Ryan Hester, John Lee, and Jeff Pasquino. Thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. And thanks for being a football guy. To check out all of our DFS content over at footballguys.com, click on the icon in front of Ryan's face. To subscribe to our Football Guys TV YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click below me now.